hopefully we have nice clarity. And I'm going to be finishing off some more cereal, so hope you guys enjoy listening to that shit. And headlights are working. Good.
On social media. Start listening with a 30-day trial and your first
and we immediately get droplets
Visit
all over.
audible.com/serial. Support for Serial.
Well, from inside the car, it's pretty good though. I'm sure the camera looks awesome.
But as a company that helps people make websites,
I will
it shaped the way they tell their
put these on a low setting.
Squarespace.com.
So it'll wipe off every once in a while.
To redeem a special offer.
And destroy the Rain-X that I just applied.
Previously on Serial. We're like, man, we like CIA or what? Behind our back. We thought he was drunk, huh?
They will kill you just for the amusement of being able to shoot you.
And it quickly became very apparent to us that the Taliban knew.
This is fucking bullshit. He's in Pakistan.
Here,
from This American Life in WBC
really
Chicago, it's Serial. One story told week by week.
Wipers on.
I'm Sarah Koenig.
So in this kind of weather, people drive real slow in California, almost like it's ice conditions. Mainly because the gutter systems are terrible here in California. And the other reason is it doesn't rain a lot, so a lot of oil and grease gets built up on the roads, and it's very slick, so you can hydroplane very easy. So the fact that the gutter system's terrible, there's a lot more water on the road, and then on top of it there's a lot of oil and grease and rubber from the tires built up into the street because it doesn't rain and wash all that crap off. And even when it does rain and try to wash that stuff off, it doesn't really have anywhere to go. Like, look, it's all pooled up over here. So we'll have some real fun conditions today.
Two officers brought me up there, and they put a piece of paper in front of me, which is a script, and said, "Read this." What was the script? And it was like, it was kind of cheesy too. It was like, "Hey Bo, this is Josh. We really miss you. You know, we just want you to come back. We hope you're safe. We hope everything's going okay. You know, so come back, Bo." I kept thinking later on that like for the entire 5 years maybe they played the same thing. I was like, wonder how long like this has been going on in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Telling Bo to come home.
Safe to say, Bo never heard the message. Also safe to say, Bo was trying really hard to come home. His first year in captivity starts with an escape and ends with an escape, like shitty bookends to a terrible year. In between the escapes, Bo was learning necessary, twisted lessons of survival. How to smile when you're in agony. That if you ask for something, such as water, you're likely to get less of it, or less of something else, such as food. If you're severely dehydrated, you can't really drink your own urine, because it turns into a salty brown sludge. That filth and stink are your best weapon. The more disgusting you are, the less your captors want to come near you, which means you can squirrel things away in your bedclothes. The smaller and weaker you can make yourself, the more likely the Taliban are to let you alone. And as painful as it is to be forgotten, ultimately, that's what you want.
Like, the best description I could probably give you is, if you took literally, not even an animal, picture someone taking a bag, throwing it into the closet, shutting the door, and just forgetting about it.
What?
That was basically how they treated me. The majority of the time, in the first year, when I was in that household, in my 19.
Well, Sun King Zadran was a commander in charge of keeping Bo prisoner up until 2013, when Sun King was killed in a
that was a fun bout.
Otherwise, it was literally just locked in a room and forgot.
Back in Afghanistan, the storm of search and rescue operations for Bo had slowed and then dwindled. They'd keep their eyes and ears out, of course, but at a certain point, the military had to call it. While Bo was in the worst place he could be, if anyone was going to rescue him, locked in a room across the border in Pakistan.
It seemed like a very strong possibility that he was a Taliban sympathizer. I'll put it that way. And it seemed that he, the unrated version is like, what a fucking asshole, you know?
That was Mark Bull's first casual assessment of Bo when he heard the early reports that Bo had walked off. And it was a lot of people's assessment. And it's understandable based on the information dripping out at the time. An early propaganda video, reports that Bo had converted to Islam.
Yeah, and then there were, I also remember there was the thing of him like, that there had been some kind of reporting that he was riding around on a horse. I remember that too.
I'm just looking at one from the Daily Mail, and it says, one of his captors said that he converted to Islam and was going under the name Abdullah and was, quote, very relaxed in our company, unquote. It has also been claimed that Virgil was so trusted by his kidnappers that they let him sleep without restraints and go bird and rabbit hunting with an old British rifle.
Oh, you know what? That reminds me. I heard another one that he played soccer.
Information like this, I learned that intelligence analysts refer to it as stray voltage. By that they mean it's almost certainly untrue. But still, added up to people judging from the outside, it didn't look good. Mark said it made him feel like maybe Bo wasn't someone he should be caring about, which is the opposite feeling you usually get when you hear about a POW. But then, after Bo came back and was in Germany recovering, Mark talked to someone in the intel world who knew what was going on.
I actually remember somebody telling me, oh yeah, he's doing a ton of intel debriefings. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I thought he was some kind of like Taliban guy. And they were like, no, he's not. And this was during the period when all the press reporting was about, you know, how like mentally damaged he was and how he was gradually, you know, reacclimating to the world, and everyone was like cautioning, like, you know, don't expect him to pop up on TV anytime soon because he's severely traumatized. And then I was also hearing that like privately he was, I mean, maybe all that stuff was true, and I'm sure it is, but at the same time he was doing a lot of intel debriefing. So I was like, wait, he's doing intel debriefs, that doesn't sound like a traitor.
When I finally heard Bo talk about his time with the Taliban, I thought, no, he does not sound like a traitor. As brutal as Bo's first year in captivity was, at least he had plans. His single-minded purpose was to get out. As best as Bo can recall, the first escape, if you don't count the one where he ran 20 or 30 feet before he got tackled, happened the first week he was in Taliban custody. Taliban fighters, by the way, have confirmed that Bo did escape once, briefly, early on, and then again for a longer time, roughly a year later. That first week, Bo says he was being held at a house of some kind. His feet were tied with ropes. A chain was wrapped in several loops around his wrists. He said he noticed that the previous morning, a car had arrived with water, and as soon as it did, everyone went inside another room for tea. So when the car came again with the water, Bo says he saw his chance. He managed to manipulate the slack in the chain so that he could slip it over his knuckles. He untied his feet. The wooden doors of the room he was in were latched from the outside with a thick wire, so he had to stick his hand through the crack to undo it.
So I'm like sticking my hand out, and I mean, good grief, if anyone was standing outside, like they would have fully seen me fiddling with the damn wire, basically trying to open the door.
But no one does see. He runs outside, turns right, and then realizes he's in some kind of shallow valley or plateau. He sees 3 houses about 200 yards off, starts running. He's shoeless. He says there's mostly jagged rocks underfoot, but he sprints as best he can. At the first house, he sees some kids.
They see me and they start screaming, they run towards the house, and I see a woman come running out of the gate. She like sees me and does like that one-footed like stutter stop thing, and she like runs back into the house.
He keeps going. Sees a group of men standing around. The men also see him. So Bo runs towards some trees, passes the second house, comes to the third, decides to climb onto the roof.
And I get to the top of the roof, and there's like a mud puddle there. And, I'm staying low, and, I basically just slide onto the roof, which happens to be covered in mud. And I, roll a few times to try and cover myself into even more mud. And it almost worked.
The men find him up there, lead him back down.
I just kind of interesting when I almost like to do it. So, I guess the ground, right? I guess the old lady from the house, the old woman from the house, had come out at the commotion. All these young guys are, everybody's talking loudly. And, I'm covered in mud, and this old woman comes up to me, and she's tries to start, she's trying to wipe the mud off my face. And one of the young guys grabs her by the arm and kind of chucks her behind him. She yells at him and leads me off.
Start to finish, the escape lasted maybe 10 or 15 minutes, Bo says. But the aftermath was severe. They brought Bo back to where they'd been holding him, and once evening came, Bo says they beat him with a rubber hose. At first it was one guy who spoke some English. He'd twirl the hose and then whack it against Bo's feet. Or as Bo covered his feet with his hands, he'd whack his hands. He doesn't know exactly how long that lasted, but it was a long while, he says. The next morning, a whole group of men came in with a guy who seemed to be an elder, and they all took turns hitting Bo with the hose, until the older man called them off and took his own turn. And then that evening, Bo thinks it was evening, he's not sure, says he was blindfolded this whole time, they moved him.
They moved me into a new place because I'm pretty sure they're we saw where we were, or someone might have seen him, so we gotta...
Oh, I see. And then in the new place, how were you imprisoned, or how did they contain you?
In the new place, they put me on a Afghan bed and chained my feet to the end of the bed and chained my hands to the top of the bed. So I was basically spread eagle on the bed, blindfolded. That's how it goes. The majority of the next 3 months.
3 months, Bo was chained spread eagle to a bed and blindfolded. He was allowed to get up twice a day to use the toilet, he says. That's it. In a statement Bo wrote, that was released as part of his legal case, he said that because of the heat and sweat, his body got sore and raw where it was in contact with the bed. His eyes burned from the pressure of the blindfold. He could never wipe himself from them. He developed open wounds on his ankles, an infection which seemed to spread to his forehead. They beat the bottoms of his feet and other parts of his body with a copper cable. Bo says there came a day when he tried to walk, and his guards saw his legs were shaking from weakness. After that, they rearranged one of his arms, secured it down by his side instead of over his head, which allowed him to at least sit up. The room had dirt walls and a dirt floor, Bo says. Every 3 or 4 weeks, he could shower and wash his clothes. By the time 6 months hit, Bo had diarrhea. He would have diarrhea for roughly 3.5 years. No toilet paper or regular access to water. Most of the time, his food was scant and came unpredictably. In the broadest strokes, his captivity consisted of twin torments, isolation and sickness. Or, as Bo's principal military briefer described it, there were roughly 3 phases to Bo's captivity. Phase 1, torture. Phase 2, abuse. Phase 3, neglect.
The time deprivation, too much light or too much darkness, and too much randomness just wears away at you and just drives your nerves into the ground.
Yeah.
The constant worry of, am I going to die today, or something worse going to happen today? Am I going to get food today, or am I going to be able to go to the bathroom without some kind of problem happening, or it's just constant.
The conversations between Bo and Mark started just a few months after Bo came back. Bo talks a lot about how he's felt or distant or disconnected, which actually has the benefit of helping him talk about what happened. Still, the details about the worst episodes are sometimes hard to say, and hard for Mark to take in.
As a story, it's really, it's overwhelming. I can comprehend it in little bits and pieces, like the isolated stuff as it goes along, these details that you're giving me, each one of them makes sense, and they're kind of not that hard to imagine because you're good at describing it. So then when you accumulate them all together, you think about this stretch of time, and you think about just day in and day out, that's going to become sort of incomprehensibly dark, you know?
Yeah.
It's just, and I understand why the SEER guys and the psychologists were so surprised that you weren't a total vegetable, you know? Because I think that would have been enough to basically put 95% of people turn them into potatoes.
Yeah.
Bo was being held by the Haqqanis, a group run by a very powerful Pashtun family allied with the Taliban. They're based in North Waziristan, which is in Pakistan's tribal region bordering Afghanistan. The Haqqanis had agreed to hold Bo for the Taliban, and the guy in charge of Bo's physical person was Mullah Sanghi. But Bo says he only saw Sanghi maybe half a dozen times over the years.
This happens every once in a while. It gets busy on this route, but it's still better than the 405 if you ask me.
Bo says, especially at the beginning, the
I also
Taliban
am not a fan of this minivan.
normally think of as an interrogation. The questions were strange and sometimes incoherent.
Questions like, the officers on your base, how do they get their prostitutes? We know that you guys bring prostitutes on base, and, they're trying to find every dirty little secret. Oh, you guys, what kind of alcohol do you drink? We know you all drink, and, what about drugs? And they ask you, is Obama gay and sleeps with men? And then they ask you about, how good a cameras do the drones have, or, they ask you anything. Thankfully, the guy who did speak English and was asking me, information, military information, he knew everything, and he wasn't interested in what I had to say because he didn't trust me. And so he never really asked me anything that was, that I could, that I could answer. At one time he asked me how many bombs could fit on a bomber, and I have no idea because I'm not a Air Force pilot.
This hodgepodge of perfectly reasonable questions. How do the drones work? And then a kind of crazy talk. Is it true all American women are prostitutes? That they sleep with animals? It makes you wonder whether they're just trying to rile Bo up, or whether their understanding of our world is as paltry as our understanding of theirs.
Something I learned really quickly was if you show hesitation in telling them something, then they think they're onto something. But if they ask you a question and you just start talking to them, like if you're talking to a normal person,
Yeah.
then they get extremely suspicious because they think, well, if he has no problem telling me this, then there's something wrong with that information.
So either way, they pretty much assume you're lying, which is maybe why they didn't really press him too hard on any of this stuff. High-ranking Taliban told us, through reporter Sami Yousafzai, that Bo didn't give them any useful intelligence or cooperation. Besides, Bo said the Taliban get most of their information they consider more trustworthy, from Afghan interpreters who work with U.S. forces. So Bo's value wasn't in what he knew. It was in the sheer fact of him, a U.S. soldier that belonged to them.
So getting information for me wasn't their main priority. Getting videos out of me was what they wanted to do.
You might have seen some of these videos on the internet. Bo said they made probably a dozen of them that were never released, but a small handful were. Bo said the Taliban spend a lot of time making them. They're morale boosting. Plus, he says the Taliban love to embarrass the United States any way they can. But you can't make too many videos, or release too many, because every time you do, you're exposing yourself. Details about the staging, or someone's accent, or the production values, or the decor might give your location away. Bo says they'd sometimes make a number of videos during the same shoot, changing the backdrop, or his clothes, or his hair, or his beard, to pretend the videos had been taken at different times in different locations. The guy who made Bo's videos spoke English, seemed Western educated, he had a slight British accent. He'd come into Bo's room always with the same irritating greeting.
He'd say, hey, well, what's up? That was for some strange reason, the guys who could speak fairly good English, that was always their thing. Hey, what's up? They'd be like, it's how terrible authority is, and, how badly that you were treated, or how corrupt the politicians are, and, stuff like that.
And so, did you have to work on your answers?
Well, like the first time he talked to me, I gave him answers, and he was all satisfied with that. But the moment he turned the camera on, I completely forgot what I was supposed to say.
After that, they wrote everything down.
One is that the justice treatment, as my country's army has treated their Muslim prisoners in Tehran, Guantanamo Bay, Abu Ghraib, and many other secret prisons located around the world. When I ran with them, I was continuing to speak and continuing to be taken.
In this video, Bo's wearing a camouflage jacket, helmet, and some sunglasses. He looks really weird. He said the sunglasses were so you couldn't see his eyes reading the paper. And also, maybe because the Taliban thinks sunglasses look cool, which, agreed.
I had nobody to pry me of my clothes and take pictures of me naked. I had no dogs barking at me and biting me, as my country has done to the Muslim prisoners in the jails in my country.
When he made that video, Bo says the bed he was chained to, Spread Eagle, was just off to his left. The videos hit this theme a lot, how well he's being treated, compared to how the U.S. treats Taliban prisoners.
How are the Mujahideen treating you?
He says, how are Mujahideen treating you?
They're treating me better than I've been treated in just as a guest in a regular household in America.
The videos also hit other common Taliban talking points, one of which is that the U.S. government is lying to the American public about how many American soldiers have been killed in Afghanistan.
The Americans claim there's only a few hundred dead so far. Well, is this true or is it more higher? I believe the death toll of Americans in Afghanistan is higher than what the government allows the world to know.
The Army has moral guidelines for how a soldier is supposed to behave if he or she is captured by the enemy. It's called the Code of Conduct. It says, among other things, if I am captured, I will continue to resist by all means available. I will make every effort to escape. I will give no information or take part in any action which might be harmful to my comrades. And when questioned, besides name, rank, and serial number, quote, I will evade answering further questions to the utmost of my ability. I will make no oral or written statements disloyal to my country and its allies or harmful to their cause, unquote. Soldiers I talked to from Bo's battalion told me the fact that Bo appears in these videos at all, that he's answering their questions, repeating their talking points, that right there is an obvious violation of the Code of Conduct. They said even if someone has a gun to your head, and by the way, Bo says there were guys with guns on these video shoots, you don't participate in the enemy's propaganda campaign. Well, that's actually an interpretation of the code that military officials do not agree with. That is not the standard the Army is asking soldiers to live up to. You are not expected to die refusing to make a video. In the First and Second Gulf Wars, American POWs showed up in propaganda videos too, and the military didn't blame them for it. They understand that as a prisoner, you're going to be compelled to do things you don't want to do. And also, while the U.S. military isn't going to encourage you to be in a video if you're captured, there is an upside to being filmed. Your government has proof you're alive. At a military hearing on Bo's case, Terrence Russell, the guy who debriefed Bo, said in these videos, Bo did what he had to do, and that as the videos go on, you can see him getting better at resisting, at minimizing the propaganda value. In the very first video the Taliban released, mid-July 2009, about 3 weeks after Bo disappeared, Bo was sitting in front of a table with some green liquid in a big mug. Mark asked Bo what it was.
Mountain Dew. It was Mountain Dew. Like, if you want to piss those people off in that country, all you do is cut off their sugar supply.
It's in this video that Bo explains how he was captured.
Okay, how were you arrested? Captured? I was captured outside a mess cellar. What were you doing? I was behind a patrol. I was lagging behind the patrol, and I was captured.
This was widely reported back in the U.S., that Bo said he was caught while lagging behind on a patrol. And again, a bunch of the soldiers I talked to mentioned this, that when they heard it, it made them mad. Because it's such obvious nonsense. U.S. soldiers do not lag behind on patrols in Afghanistan, and then just disappear without anyone noticing. It's not a thing. So when they heard it was in the video, some of them saw it as evidence that Bo was lying about what happened. Bo was lying. He says of course he was lying. He says he knew that Americans listening would know it was baloney. That was the point.
That was one way in the video of basically telling people, hey, what I'm saying in this video is, you know, it's a lie. It's pre-staged. It's pre-rehearsed. And it has nothing to do with, you know, reality. And, you know.
Was it all rehearsed or staged?
Yeah. It was.
So none of it was you, the real you. I mean, would you?
It was a desperate me trying to figure out how to stay on the edge of not cooperating with them and yet cooperating with them to the point that they don't shoot me.
The guys guarding Bo don't speak English, which makes sense. Why would they? But also that same high-ranking Taliban told us they don't necessarily want someone like Bo near anyone who speaks English, because they might say something just inadvertently and it could help him with an escape. And even if they couldn't really talk to him, Bo says they interacted with him. They messed with him. They'd throw things at him, or point an AK-47 at him. Just kidding. Once they tried to make him smoke a cigarette with a little firecracker in it. When he handed it back, he yelled bang at one of the guards. After that, the guy gave him less food. Bo learned not to sleep in the daytime because it left him open to these guys. They might take any opportunity. Picture being shaved by the Taliban with a straight razor. He's handcuffed. Even then, when he couldn't be more vulnerable, they'd have a laugh at his expense.
And what they really find hilarious is a guy who has a beard but he doesn't have a mustache.
Okay.
So, you know, what happened was the jokes came in the sense that, you know, they shaved my face in the way that would most amuse them.
I see.
And they take videos or take pictures. You have to laugh at yourself in order to keep things from getting worse. But you know, basically the reality of the situation was the butt of the joke was me, and that just was something I had to accept.
Sami Yousafzai, the Afghan reporter, interviewed some people who had dealings with Bo while he was in captivity. A big shot who came by and talked to Bo in his cell, the guy who cooked for him, a friend of one of the guards, someone from Mullah Sangin's entourage. What Sami took away from these interviews is that keeping Bergdahl was, number one, stressful.
You have to keep him away from everybody, not only from drones. You have to keep him away from Al-Qaeda, Arabs and bandits. Because if something happens, you know, then you are responsible. You will be, you know, beaten and even arrested by. So that's why.
These guards are watching the only U.S. soldier who's ever been taken prisoner in this war. Other groups might want to steal him from them. Sami said the guards had heard talk that some Arabs in masks had almost made it to the house where they were holding Bo, and that Mullah Sangin had captured and executed some people he thought were being paid by the U.S. for information on Bo. So even though it's a prestigious job, it still sucks.
Yeah.
I see.
It's still like mentally a lot of pressure
and boring.
It would happen. And boring.
That's the other thing Sami heard in these interviews, how tedious it was for them, which is probably where the stupid and sometimes sadistic jokes come in. These guys are mostly young men. They're stuck inside a compound or some other prison location, while their pals are maybe out and about enjoying themselves.
You know, having fun, dancing a ton or something, but here, you know, you're bored. Nobody is allowed to come to visit. Because of this guy, we're having trouble. You know, we cannot go around, we cannot go to the city, we cannot make a phone call because there was nothing here. So even for the guard, you know, we were not really happy.
Right.
But still, since you were the audience, I'm sure Mullah Sangin was promising him a lot of things.
Yeah.
This is big chicken and with all more money and everything.
Sami talked to a friend of one of the guards who told him that to amuse themselves, they'd think up things to do to Bo, or how to get rid of Bo. They had a long hypothetical discussion about circumcising him. They talked about selling him, or maybe calling in a phony tip to the Americans that they had Osama bin Laden, so there'd be a raid and they could be done with it. In other words, they're young guys shooting the shit, following orders. Bo's keepers would make him watch execution videos of beheadings or suicide bombers. Bo said the very first day they got him, they showed him a video of Mujahideen executing prisoners. He talks to Mark a lot about these videos, in part because he's still affected by them, certain details lodged in his head. In one, a man is about to be beheaded. He looks terrified, he's silent, and a rooster is crowing. For Bo, the videos were obviously disturbing on their face, but they were also a grisly warning that this could happen to him at any time.
With every group I went to, they all had their own videos to show me.
And were they showing you like this is shit that you've done, or just stuff that other people do?
The majority of them was, this is what other people have done. A few of them have been, this is what our people have done. And there was one guy who was, I would say, literally, basically out of his mind. In fact, to the point where the other Taliban called him Crazy Taliban. He was, they used Crazy Taliban. They used, because he had been in Bagram. And, so they called him Crazy Taliban. And he told me that he killed, like, one time on one of his shifts, he told me he killed, he decapitated 2 guys. And then a few months later, he came back, and he told me that he had done another.
Oh, while he was into him, while he wasn't seeing you?
Yeah, while he hasn't seen me. And the people he was killing, he called them Jasus. And those are the guys who are basically, they're Afghans who betray their brothers for America.
During all this time, Bo is scheming and plotting, gathering information that he hopes will get him out, and that he can deliver back to the U.S., which, by the way, he does. Terrence Russell, at the military hearing, said he and other debriefers, intelligence debriefers, seer psychologists, FBI agents, all found Bo eager to download whatever intel he could, and, quote, remarked on the quality of information Sergeant Bergdahl was providing, unquote. Also, they praised his recall. Bo said he was trying all the time to store in his memory mental pictures of every detail he could. For this mission, he pretty much starts from zero when he's chained down and blindfolded. When he can't see, he listens, tries to discern the daily patterns of the people who kept him, when they slept, when they ate, how their families work, who's related to whom. He didn't know if it would be useful to him or to someone else back home, but in case. As he gets moved around from house to house and is allowed marginally more freedom to see and to stand, he sponges up new bits of information. He ends up staying a while at a house owned by a guy he thinks was named Day. By this time, Bo was so filthy. He smelled so bad. He said the young women and little boys resented having to deal with him. They might spill his food on purpose. Once a boy beat him over the head with his own chain. As best as Bo could tell, it was because he'd been humming. But Bo started to suss out information.
There was one little kid who came in, and he was really enthusiastic to show me this hat that he had, and it was given to him by his brother. It was actually a blue baseball cap.
Oh, okay.
And he showed it to me, and on the baseball cap it said the name of the school, and in the corner it said the name of the town, and in the other side it said North Waziristan.
Oh, all in English?
Yeah, all in English.
Oh, so like somebody had given it to them, like some, like NGO or somebody.
Well, that was their school uniform.
So maybe that was the name of the place he was in, North Waziristan. Now he'd just have to figure out exactly where North Waziristan was. Everywhere he was held, he said, except for one place in the mountains, he was pretty sure he wasn't too far from what he assumed was an American base. He could hear artillery, he could see helicopters losing altitude to land, he could hear the scream of plane engines. In fact, what he was hearing was almost certainly a Pakistani base, but Bo couldn't know that. The best he could figure, he was still in Afghanistan, very near the border. Bo had no special training in how to survive any of this, how to deal with abuse, how to gather intel, how to resist while making it look like you're cooperating. As an Army private, he'd had what's called A-level SEER training, the most basic level of survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training. And what it consisted of at the time of Bo's deployment, according to Bo's senior debriefer, was, quote, here's the code of conduct, unquote. So he's just puzzling it out as he goes, trying things and then trying them again. Day's house is a sort of mud hut. Bo attempts to dig himself out something like 5 times. To get rid of the dirt he loosed from the wall, he'd mix it with his own urine or feces and then smear it back on the wall. The pebbles and rocks were harder to dispose of. At the same house there was a dog, a pretty aggressive dog that the little boys and men especially were scared of. Bo said the women sometimes gave it leftovers, so it was nicer to them. Bo knew if he tried to escape, he couldn't have the dog freaking out and barking, so he started sneaking a bit of food out to it when he was led to the latrine, which was right near where the dog slept. In that way, Bo made peace with the dog, who eventually began sleeping in the room where Bo was, which his captors thought was totally weird. Incidentally, someone who analyzed intel in Bo's case told me one of the rumors they heard along the way was that Bo had a puppy, possibly a German Shepherd puppy, which the analyst took to be silliness. But maybe this sometimes vicious guard dog was the so-called puppy. Over the months, Bo managed to gather small items, which he turned into tools. And by the end of that first year, taken together, they become his escape kit. He had a length of PVC tube to be 8 inches long. He'd been able to keep with him since the very first house. In one of the rooms, he shoved it into the wall and peed down it so his urine wouldn't just be in the room. The pipe will reappear later as part of a crossbar. He found a nail in the mud wall. He could make holes with it, scrape away dirt with it, clean his fingernails with it. And when the time came, he spent weeks rubbing the end of it on a rock until it was just the right shape to make the old-timey shackles off his wrist. He stored the nail in his older shoe. But probably the biggest score was the key. The men and boys had come into his room. One of the boys was holding a bunch of keys on a string, and he dropped them. When he did, one of the keys got away. It fell right near the mat where Bo slept. Bo slipped it underneath. He said nobody seemed to notice it was missing. It wasn't the key to the padlocks he needed to open. But Bo says the locks were chiefly made from these locks, and that by wiggling the key just so, he could hit the sweet spot and pop them open.
And with that one key and using that technique, it allowed me to open, I think, the 3 padlocks that they're using to hold the chains around my feet and the chains that were chained to the door or wherever it was that they were chained. So, over the year, over the months, I was able to keep this key.
Bo had tried many escapes. He'd gotten as far as a courtyard, up to a wall. But they were forays, really. His biggest and best chance came when he was in a remote place in the mountains. This was the farthest he ever was from a populated area. Basically a Taliban prison. Bo calls it the Mountain Fortress.
Because it was really, it looked like a fortress. It had like this really tall battlement type thing. It was like a lookout tower or something. And I know it was old because wood that was used to make like the rafters and the pillars and the stairs and everything was just this really old wood. And like it was actually hand chiseled. You could see the chisel marks.
In the Mountain Fortress, Bo was kept in a second-story room, which was padlocked. But there was a window without bars on it. This place was so old. And he seemed so pathetic by that point, since his guards weren't taking the extra precautions. Bo had the nail, key, PVC pipe, plus a wooden stake that was in the room. He had an empty liter bottle of Mountain Dew, a hat, blanket, sandals. He went for it.
And so in the middle of the night, I put everything together. I practiced all the nights before, counting the hours down to the point where everything was silent, so I knew everyone was asleep for the most part. And I practiced the nights before, putting, like, with no sight, just all feeling, putting everything together, tying my bedding together, getting the padlocks off, getting my handcuffs off, tying up the water bottle that I had. So then finally, once I had all that done, I threw the makeshift rope out the window.
The rope was made from the 2 chains he'd now liberated, each about 6 feet long, plus his bedding. It ended up being quite a bit longer than he needed. The drop to the ground was only about 15 feet, but Bo didn't know that.
I used PVC bar and PVC pipe and the stake as the crossbar to brace in the window, and that allowed me to time out.
There's a reason maybe you haven't heard other American POW escape stories. It's because there hasn't been a successful one since the Vietnam War. Again, the code of conduct says you're supposed to attempt it, but the Army understands, especially since Vietnam, that the odds are usually and overwhelmingly against you. If you're a POW and you assess the situation and you decide, it's highly unlikely I can make it out that window without being shot. It's highly unlikely that even if I do make it out, I'll be able to blend in with the local population. And it's highly likely that if the enemy finds me, they will torture or kill me. So no, I'm not going to try to go out that window. That is right and fine. No one will fault you for it. To me, more than anything, this moment in the mountain fortress puts all the talk about Bo being a sympathizer to rest. Bo did not sympathize with the Taliban. He loathed the Taliban. So much so that even when he's sick, when he doesn't have any food, when he's already been punished for escaping the first time, he knows what that's like. And still, goes out the window. At the bottom, he makes a bag out of his blanket, puts his water bottle in it, slings it over his shoulder, and starts walking. Bo says apart from being rescued, it was maybe the best moment of his 5 years.
It's like a huge weight was just lifted off my back. And suddenly my sickness, suddenly all the pain just didn't matter anymore. You know, it's just walking.
It's high desert terrain, cold at night, hot in the day, rocky. There are bushes and trees supposed to look like Joshua trees, and something piney, not a lot of cover. But his immediate objective is not to hide, though he'll have to do a lot of hiding, obviously. But right now, he's trying to get as far away as he can from the fortress. He wants to spread the search party as thinly as possible. He heads what he hopes is southeast, intending to go into Pakistan. He figures he's got a better shot at encountering someone non-hostile to him in Pakistan. But the terrain is so difficult. He's in these short, steep, mazy mountains. You get over one, there's immediately another one. And they're all about the same height, so it's not like you can reach a peak and get your bearings, see the twinkle of a friendly fob in the distance. He climbs and descends, sometimes scooting on his butt. All the while, he's listening for water to replenish his water bottle. He reaches a valley, and it's populated. He keeps having to veer this way or that, skirt a fence or house or a sheep herder's tent.
So, stupidly trying to put distance between me and the tent, I wasn't taking my time and taking it slow and easy, and I step off a cliff. I don't know how long, I don't know how big of a drop it was.
Fucking me up.
It was a big enough drop for me to think on the way down. It was like, the initial drop was like, oh good grief, but then I kept falling to the point where I got over the surprise that I was falling, and I started thinking, you've got to be kidding me, it cannot be this far down.
Bo lands on a dry riverbed on his left side. He said the word oof actually came out of his mouth, just like in a cartoon, loud enough so that some dogs started barking their heads off.
Maybe about 30, 40 feet away from where I had fallen, there was a creek. So I wanted to fill up my water bottle because that's what I was looking for. So I drank as much water, and like when I pulled the water bottle out, that was when I realized that I couldn't actually move my fingers to my left hand. Because I couldn't get the top off. So that was my first inkling that, what I did to my left side was a lot worse than what I was feeling at the time.
Your adrenaline must have just been pumping so hard this whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And I think that's the reason why I didn't feel what I ended up feeling about maybe 15 minutes later.
He's done something terrible to his left leg and his left arm. And the pain of that starts to wash over him. And then